Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. And I'm here with Luann Lee of your college planning coach. And we are going to talk tonight about college financial planning information that you need to have as parents of 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So we're hoping to try and catch people on the earlier side so that you have a chance to plan if what we talk about tonight applies to your situation. And you'll understand, hopefully, as we go through tonight, why it's important to learn what we're going to teach you before the end of the year. So that's the gist about tonight. But before we truly get started, I would love to see in the chat if you can share with us where you're from. I mean, what year in high school your student is in. We sent this invitation to families from 9th to 11th grade, so just be nice to know who's here. And if you even know anything about FAFSA, SAI, financial aid, and if you don't, it's perfectly fine, but if you do, let us know. Somebody early on said, I can't hear. I'm hoping that most people can. I'm guessing for the person who can't hear, maybe there's a setting that you didn't press or you have to turn up your volume. Okay, or that's a good idea. Go back out and then come back in. Okay, just a little bit more housekeeping. This is officially a meeting. And I tell people that so that you come in muted. And if you can keep yourself muted, that's great. Then we don't hear any background noise. But actually, if you really want to ask a question, and we've done this many times, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. You can raise your hand. There's a feature that you have to do that. You can send a note that says, I have a question. I'd like to say it out loud. Sometimes it's just easier to express yourself verbally than writing it, but either way is fine. And feel free to ask questions in the chat. This is recorded and we send the link out tomorrow. So I hope that's all good information. And good, I see most people here have an 11th grader, a few 10th graders, a 9th grader. This is perfect. I'm so glad. I mean, sounds kind of silly, but I know Luann feels the same way, but it warms my heart to be able to talk to people early at this stage, because as Luann will share, we speak to too many people too late in the process. So it's nice to have you guys on board on the earlier side. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Luann, who's going to go through the slides. I will pipe in while she's going through the slides. I will answer questions in the chat, and we'll get going.
All righty. Well, Debbie, thank you so much. And greetings, everyone. I saw a few people from Virginia in the chat. So I'm in Warrenton, Virginia, at my office. So I think we all had a little bit of a chillier day today. And I'm looking forward to, some really nice chilly weather that we need for the fall. So I have been in college planning for going on 20 years now. And Debbie and I have worked together. Gosh, Debbie, I don't know, maybe 6 or more years at least.
Exactly. Yep.
Just trying to help families figure out how to pay for college. And there's so many steps to this. So tonight, Debbie and I, every single year say, oh my gosh, I wish we could get parents that are with younger kids to understand, just how expensive it's gotten, how much it's changed since they went to college, so that they can start planning and do that kind of what we call smart planning. So that's what it's going to be like for this evening. It's all about how to prepare early enough to maybe make some changes. So let's go ahead, and our agenda for tonight. It's funny, I've had a few people that have scheduled consultations with me in the last several weeks, and they do have juniors and sophomores, and they're calling to find out about, well, how can I reduce what I'm going to be expected to pay in my base financial year. So it's a perfect timing. And I think parents are starting to feel the weight and that burden of how expensive college has gotten. We'll be discussing, what you need to know about the FAFSA and the CSS Profile, two of the major financial aid forms, the dreaded SAI, which is the Student Aid Index, and then some tips, and have some time for questions. You can put questions in the chat, and Debbie can try to answer them as we're going along, or maybe we'll have some time at the end for some general questions.
And sorry, Luann, let me say one other thing.
Yep.
I think going forward, we're also going to invite families of, again, probably 10th and 11th graders to other presentations that we have that are honestly geared towards family with 12th graders. But again, if you guys come and just kind of start hearing the information, you'll A, see what's ahead. B, some of the things that we mentioned in those presentations, again, if you knew of them earlier, you would make different decisions. And it just gives you time for some of this all to sink in, because, again, when you're a family with the 12th grader, it just kind of starts to pile on. And so I think somewhere, Luann, you once said, like, basically the best, like, time is on our side if you start early in this process. It really is like the best factor that you could have. So anyhow, so I just put that out there. If you see other invites that we have of webinars, they may not be completely geared to you, but think about coming.
Oh, absolutely. The more that you can hear, and it gets repeated and such, but it's like a different language, and it's overwhelming. My private clients, every one of them says, this is just so overwhelming, I don't know where to start. So the earlier that you can kind of put yourself into this environment little by little, it doesn't end up being like a fire hose. So, you may have heard the word FAFSA and CSS Profile, and if not, now is a good time. If you've got kids that are anywhere from 8th grade onwards, and I know 8th grade sounds like, oh my gosh, are you crazy? I've had parents reach out to me when I've, been at a college fair or such, and they look at my table and say, oh, geez, we don't need to talk to you yet. Our student is just starting their junior year in high school. And it's just amazing to me that the cost of education that it is today, we have to start planning earlier. So there's something called the base financial planning year. And, we all think, oh gosh, if we knew about this, we could go ahead and pay a lot less for college. And I'm going to tell you, probably 15 or so years ago, that was doable, but it's not as doable these days as it used to be. I was sharing with Debbie just before we came on tonight. I found one of back from 2008, a presentation that I did. And at the time, there was a asset protection allowance of like $75,000 a year for parents that were 65 and older. And the asset protection allowance these days is zero for everyone. So a lot has changed over the years, and it's not as easy to to kind of build that strategy. You might hear people say, oh yeah, we'll help you reduce your expected family contribution, or now the student aid index, but it's not as easy as it was years ago. So the base financial planning year is actually, it starts on January 1st of the year that your student is a sophomore till the end of the year on December 31st. And they're, of course, a junior at that time. And after that date, you can't make any kind of adjustments that would make a difference to bring down your student aid index and such, because it's on that tax year. So you'll hear the term prior, and you're thinking, what the heck does that mean? Well, your taxes that they're using to input, to do the calculations on what your family contributions will be are 2 years prior to the time that your student starts college. So right now, you've got a senior in high school. So this is 2024. They're able to complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile now. This is the first year that they're able to do this. For next year, the year that they will start college in the fall of 2025 into the spring of 2026. So just think about it. The year that they start school, 2 years prior to that, is the tax year that you'll use. So seniors this year are using the 23 tax return. Those of you with juniors, for next year, you're going to use the 24 tax return. Sophomores starting in the year, 26, 27, will use the 20, even I get confused. So next year, your juniors are going to go into the 26, 27 year. You'll use 24 tax return. Sophomores are going to use the 25 tax return for 27, 28. And, if I sound confused, I'm always working in 3 years. It's never just 1 year. So your income is pretty much the driving force for coming up with what you're going to be expected to contribute with those calculations. Your assets are going to be current as of the day that you file. And I've got a little bit of a case study to go over that will show you why sometimes it can be important to, depending on your assets, you might be able to do a little bit of restructuring, you may not. So things to start thinking about early enough before they're put into place. Now, typically the FAFSA and the CSS profile will start on October 1st. Back in the day when I first got started, it was January 1st. But it became October 1st, probably about, 6 or 7 years ago, because it made it simpler for people to already have their tax returns done for the most part. Now, the FAFSA has had a little bit of a challenge starting last year. There were a lot of changes with the Department of Education, and it didn't go well. And so they did a little bit of a beta rollout starting this year. So it's not open yet for everyone until December 1st instead of October 1st. Now, so what is the FAFSA? And if you're looking at that and you're saying FAFSA instead of FAFSA, it took me like 5 years before I could say it correctly. So don't feel bad. But it's the free application for federal student aid. And it's just a form that is letting the government know, where do you stand on the federal poverty guidelines to be able to qualify for any kind of grant assistance from the government that comes in the form of the Pell Grant and possible subsidized portion of the student loans. And that's about it. So you're not getting anything from FAFSA. We hear from parents in the chats and the Facebook page and parent forums all the time. I didn't get anything from FAFSA. And you don't. It's just a form that calculates your eligibility to provide help to help your student pay for college. And now what it does do, it's eligibility for federal financial aid, but then there are going to be some schools that will give institutional aid as well. And we'll discuss that a little bit further. But some of you, if you're in a lower income, and when I'm talking lower income, it depends on the state. Some states it's, $60,000 AGI or less. Some it's $100,000 or less. So every state is going to be a little bit different. But there are some states that do provide state assistance in the form of grants for families. And so in the past, many states, the FAFSA form was the driving force to then they can complete the FAFSA and then connect to the state grants. But last year, with all the problems that we had with the FAFSA, there wasn't that connection. And to be quite honest, I don't know if it's going to continue or not. So if you feel that you've got, some time on your side, you can reach out to your state education department and find out, does my state give any kind of grant assistance for families, and what is the income caps? And that way you can prepare yourselves for that. Now, one of the big things is that the biggest tip that I can tell you about the FAFSA is don't think that you have to do it on the day that it opens. So often parents will say, I'm going to stay up until midnight and get my FAFSA done on, the 1st of October or, soon the December 1st. Do yourselves a favor and just sleep in, for a few days. The site is normally, there's so many hundreds of thousands of people that are trying to do the same thing because everybody tells them, you've got to do it as soon as possible because the money's going to run out. Well, it doesn't run out. That's a big fallacy. Some of the state grants could run out, but it's not going to run out in the first, 2 or 3 days that the FAFSA opens. So just give yourself a little bit of grace to wait a little bit so that you don't get caught up in all of those crashes and the site going down and such. Now, so the FAFSA, the basics, and some of you're going to not like this slide very much at all, because there are limits to what your student can borrow, which is very different from what many of you were able to do years ago when you went to college. Because I still talk to parents every single day that they're just now finishing paying off their own student loans. And the thing that they say to me as they're trying, filling out the CSS profile and such is, wait a minute, I'm just finishing paying off my loans. My parents didn't have to pay for anything. And now you're telling me that I have to co-sign or I have to take out Parent Plus loans. And the only amount that my kids can get is these figures that we have on this slide. So it has changed quite a bit over the years, and you need to be prepared for this. Your student, as long as you file the FAFSA, are eligible to receive $5,500 in the direct student loan just in their name. And that's just for the freshman year. Sophomore year, it increases to $6,500. Junior and senior years are $7,500 each year. And if they should go an extra year, which a lot of students are not graduating with an undergrad in 4 years, but the national average is 5.5 years, they can borrow an additional $4,000 to have a maximum of $31,000 over the course of the time for their undergrad degree. So that's the maximum. Now, if you as the parent have applied for a Parent Plus loan, which is a federal Parent Plus loan, and if you get denied because you might have a tax lien or you have some late payments that are current and such on your credit report, if you get denied, your student can receive an additional $4,000 in the unsubsidized loan, but that's it. That's the maximum that they'll be able to receive. And if you get denied for the Parent Plus loan, I can pretty much guarantee you you're not going to be able to get a private loan, which is a lot more stringent in their requirements than the federal plus loan. So this is a good time to start looking at, if you've got a few years and you've got to maybe change some things, try to pay off some debt, or get your credit report kind of cleaned up a little bit. You've got some time on your side to do that. Now, the subsidized loans, there is no interest that accrues while the student is in school, but the only time that a student is going to receive a portion of their loans in a subsidized loan is if there is financial need. If they're of a low enough income that they can qualify for a portion of the Pell Grant, they can qualify for a portion of the subsidized loan. So the maximum of that $5,500 that a student can receive in a subsidized loan is $3,500 in the freshman year. There's always going to be every year $2,000 of that amount is going to be in an unsubsidized loan. Now, if your student does not qualify for any financial need-based aid as far as the government is concerned, and you're middle income and you don't qualify for Pell Grants, the whole $5,500 can be in an unsubsidized loan. It doesn't matter if you have Bill Gates kind of income, as long as you file the FAFSA, your student can qualify for these federal loans that are in their name. But it's the interest is going to accrue from the time of disbursement. And just so you know, that $5,500 as a freshman is split between the 2 semesters. And there is a 1% fee that is assessed on that as well. The Parent Plus loan has a little bit over a 4% fee that's assessed on that. And every year, the interest rates will change on July 1st. So the CSS profile is something that goes a lot deeper in financial details than the FAFSA. The FAFSA is assessing your income, your assets, your students' income and assets, but not anything to do with your retirement funds or the equity in your home. As far as the CSS profile is concerned, they do take a look at your retirement, although they're not going to assess it. And they ask about the equity in your home. And some schools will assess the equity in your home as an asset. Some assess at 100% and some assess at 0. So just like looking at FAFSA only schools and CSS profile schools, you might want to start building and looking at your college list in a way of figuring out, what's going to be affordable for us. Is the school going to require the CSS profile that's going to look much deeper into our finances? Sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's not. So when is it a good thing? It's when maybe so let's again remind you that they're going to use the prior tax return. So right now, all of the senior parents are using the 23 tax return. And maybe 2024, there was a substantial loss in income or a job loss or possible, very high medical expenses or something that was a completely different financial profile than what you had in 2023. You can explain that in a section called Special Circumstances at the end of the CSS profile. You can't explain anything on the FAFSA because it's just a federal form. So what happens if there is a substantial change, you still have to use that year's tax return that is required. But what I advise all of my parents that have these kind of situations, they want to get their taxes done as soon as possible for the year that they had, some, lower income job loss or such, and get it ready so that they can appeal once your student starts to receive acceptances and then financial aid awards come in, that you're ready with documentation to put in an appeal. And every single school is going to have their own process of doing this. They call it either special circumstances or professional judgment. The forms are either going to be on their website or in the student's portal. None of this is easy and none of it is exact, and they don't all do the same thing. So it makes it as confusing as all get out, which is, again, why it's good that so many of you are here, finding out some of this stuff early enough that it doesn't seem so overwhelming. Now, remember, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. The CSS Profile is not free. It's run by the College Board, and so they charge if your student is going to apply to a school that uses the CSS Profile. They charge a $25 application fee. It's actually a $9 application fee and then $16 for the school. Any additional schools, you're just going to pay $16 each. Now, there are only about right around 240 schools that use the CSS Profile. It's not just private schools, though. Yes, it's mostly private, super selective schools like the Ivies and the top 20 schools in, all the rankings and such. But you've got a lot of the state, what we call state Ivies, like in Virginia, UVA and William and Mary. Even though they're state schools, they still require the CSS Profile. University of Michigan, they require the CSS. So there's a list on the collegeboard.org site that says participating schools. You can look at that list to get kind of an idea, but I always go to the college websites as well, just to confirm that, especially the last couple of years when things were so iffy with the FAFSA, some schools have started to use the CSS Profile that hadn't used it in the past. Now, for those of you that do have an AGI of less than $100,000, you get fee waivers. So I've had a few families this year that, they're applying to 16 or 20 schools that use the CSS Profile, but their AGI was less than 100,000 and they didn't have to pay that fee. So that can save you a little bit of money as well. And just in case I didn't explain it well enough, the CSS Profile, it is a bit of a pain. It's kind of like doing your business taxes in a sense. I call it a financial colonoscopy, but it is a really good way for the colleges to see your financial foundation so that they can see how badly do they want your student, and are they seeing that, this is a family that can afford to keep their kid at our school. So sometimes that plays into the role of acceptances and such in what we call enrollment management, which is kind of behind the scenes. So divorced or separated families. And, tonight we're not going into the depths of FAFSA and CSS Profile, but this is a really important thing for those of you for that pre-planning. There's been some changes in the last couple of years as far as in a divorced or separated family situation. As far as the FAFSA goes, only one parent needs to be filing the FAFSA. And it used to be, it was the parent that the student lived with more than 50% of the time. Now it's the parent who provides the most financial support. And then, throw into the confusion, many parents think, well, my ex pays child support, so that must automatically mean that they provide the most financial support. Not necessarily. So you need to look at your financial situation and really take a look at, am I providing the most financial support for my student, or is my ex? And so it's, in some cases it can mean the difference between a family qualifying for the Pell Grant or not. And if you have remarried, your new spouse, the step parent, their income and assets are also going to go on the FAFSA. Even if you are there is no discussion whatsoever. They have their own children from their previous marriage that they're helping to pay for college. They're not going to be able to help you financially pay for your child, but it's still the household income. So for those of you that are considering getting remarried, and you might have several kids on both sides that you're responsible for, you might want to have that talk. Should we delay our marriage or not? And it's an unfortunate thing to have to say, to put your love life on hold. You can still live together, but once you get married, then it's official, and everybody, both the parent and the step parent, are going to have to provide their financial information. Now, on the CSS profile, though, it's the custodial parent, the non-custodial parent, any step parents, if the child has been adopted, if there are guardians, all of you, any adult that's in that child's life providing financial support, your information is going to go on the CSS profile. So it gets pretty invasive. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, I don't think my income isn't low enough that I need to bother with any of this. And I'm going to just tell you, I've been doing this for a long time. And I've had families that have had above a 220 AGI, and they were still able to get institutional aid as long as they filed the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And there are a few schools out there that will require the FAFSA and the CSS, even if they only give merit awards. Now, there are a lot of schools that say, we don't care if you file the CSS or the FAFSA, and we'll still apply award merit. So if you truly don't want to do this, and you have no intention of using the federal loan system, either for the student or for the Parent Plus loan, then you don't have to file the FAFSA or the CSS. But what I would suggest is, so that you don't leave money on the table, is that you call each school that your student is going to be applying to and ask them, do you require the CSS and or the FAFSA to award merit scholarships or not? And if they say, no, we don't need that at all, we still award merit on the merit of the student, as it should be. And then, it's up to you whether you want to file those forms or not. But as I said, even if you have Bill Gates kind of income, you should always file, because you just never know what you're going to leave on the table. So with those divorced and separated families, have a talk with your exes now, and find out, what is your plan on helping to pay for college. You don't want to find out when your student is in their senior year that there's no expectation that they're going to pay beyond, I've paid my child support and I'm done. You don't want to find that out late. And believe me, the colleges do not care what your divorce decree says. If you're taking your ex, and it could be the the mom or the dad. I'm equal opportunity here, but you can take them to court. But if the tuition bill is due, they expect it to be paid. They're not going to wait for what's going to happen in your court situation. So just be
Lynn,
aware.
do you want to just talk a little bit? Somebody asked, I answered it, but somebody asked like about what if you have an ex who doesn't want to either fill out the CSS profile non-custodial waiver, or they actually could be the parent that is supposed to fill out FAFSA and they don't want to fill that out.
Well, unfortunately, we could all say that, and what would happen? So the schools are, they're just going to say, "Well, I'm sorry." And years ago, I did have a situation with a dad who refused to complete the forms. They were divorced, and we contacted the financial aid office of the school, and they just said, "Well, we're not the school for your student." And it just is what it is. Now, if there is there are a lot of the CSS profile schools that do require a non-custodial parent to complete a form. And there are a few that do not require the non-custodial, but more often they do. And if, let's just say that that non-custodial parent has not been on the scene for years, or there might have been, some, abuse, or there's a protective order or something of that nature, then you can try for a non-custodial parent waiver. They will require documentation from maybe the school or your pastor or someone, a psychologist, or that's, if your kids are in getting support somehow, to be able to say, okay, yes, we can waive that non-custodial form. But sometimes it's up to the school, and all you can do is try to plead your case, but sometimes they'll cooperate and sometimes they won't. And then that's just not going to be the school for your student, it would appear. Okay, so the Student Aid Index, the SAI, this is why we file the FAFSA and the CSS profile, is to get this Student Aid Index. And it used to be called the EFC, or the Expected Family Contribution. And again, with all the changes to the FAFSA last year, everybody was so excited. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that EFC is going away. All it was a name change. And I think it even made it more complicated and confusing than ever, because everyone was expecting something different, that it wasn't going to be the formula that we'll discuss in the next screen anymore. And we're going to get a lot more aid. And unfortunately, it just didn't work that way. So again, the Student Aid Index is using information that was calculated on the FAFSA form and or the CSS profile. And the two do come up with differing numbers, because they assess your assets differently and have different calculations. But it's your income, the household income, parents as well as students, your AGI, the assets, which on the FAFSA excludes the retirement accounts and your home equity and your primary residence. But remember, the CSS, they ask about your retirement accounts, but they don't assess it, but they could assess the equity in your home. And then family size, number in your household, and how many are going to be attending college. Now, another big change that happened last year is that in the past, if you had multiple children that were in college at the same time, you got a bit of a discount. Your SAI would have been kind of split between the two or more students. Well, that went away for the majority of the state schools. Now, some of the private schools are still calculating if you do have more than one child in school at the same time, because they can. They're giving of their institutional monies, not giving federal monies. So, that's something to consider as you're building your college list, even though some of those private schools, their sticker price is enough to give you a nosebleed if you're sitting up in the bleacher section. But if they do take into consideration, and if you've got twins or triplets or such, that could end up being a more better financial opportunity for you. So, unfortunately, there's no cookie cutter answer to all of this, and everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. So the range of the SAI, the Student Aid Index, so it used to be just down to 0, but with the changes that they made last year, it can actually go into a negative 1,500. And what that is telling the schools, and that's somebody that is very low income, and I'm talking like, 30,000 or less of adjusted gross income. It's helping those families that really need the Pell Grants and need that extra assistance, is telling the schools that this is a very low income family. How can you help them? Now, once your SAI number goes above 0, then that Pell Grant starts to reduce. So from negative 1,500 to 0, you're qualifying for that full Pell Grant of $73.95. Anything above 0, and it starts to reduce from that $73.95. So once you get around 7,000 SAI, you're not going to receive even a small portion of the Pell Grant. It has helped a lot more students to qualify for Pell Grants, but the problem is, and I've been saying this for years, just because your SAI, or what used to be the EFC, if it was 0, doesn't mean that college is going to be for free. The colleges, they have a formula that we're going to discuss here in a minute, and they do not all give, a full ride just because your income is very low. So there's when you get the slides, you'll see here the studentaid.gov has an aid estimator that you can go online and start to plug in your figures and get an idea of what to expect your SAI figure will be. And you're going to have to do this every year. But for those of you with younger students that are here tonight, this is a good way for you to find out, what range am I in? You'll be very surprised and not happy. I've never met anyone that is happy with their SAI number, their EFC, whether it was 0 or if it was 100,000, because nobody is going to be happy. If it was a 0 SAI, it just means you're very low income. And, it's going to be very difficult for you to help your child pay for college. The grass isn't always greener on the other side. So here we have, again, prior taxes are being used. It's parents' income and assets and the student that is attending college or will be attending college. It's their income and assets as well. And make sure you pay attention when I share with you the case study as far as the student assets are concerned.
So Luann, go back for 1 second, if you don't mind, because there was a question. So
Sure.
somebody asked already and said that the grandparent had set up, I'm assuming like an UGMA account for the student.
Sorry.
And they were wondering if that would impact the SAI. And it
Well,
will, back to your example, because the UGMA or UTMA account is going to be considered a student asset.
correct.
Student assets are assessed higher than parent assets. So one thing this family might want to consider is seeing if they can move the money out of the UGMA UTMA, maybe to the parent asset, or potentially actually give it back to grandma. So it's completely out of the family's money, and the grandparent could use it to pay towards the tuition.
Yep. Yep. So whoever asked that question, pay attention here in the next slide or two, and I'm going to be sharing that example that is exactly what you're asking about. And that's why for those of you with younger students, it's really important when you're receiving those kind of funds, whether it's coming from a grandparent or an inheritance or such, that if college is going to be on the horizon in a few years, don't let anybody talk you into something because you're going to pay less in taxes. You have to kind of look at how is this going to have an impact on us as far as how much or how little are we going to have to pay for college. So hold that thought for a minute. And now, as we've been talking about how the importance of adjusted gross income, your AGI. So with the changes to the FAFSA that happened last year, it used to be if your income was 50,000 or less, it was increased to 60,000 or less to be able to give a family a little bit more access to the Pell Grant. So there is an income protection allowance. And so as you can see here, and the chart comes from the Pell eligibility and SAI guide from the Department of Ed. So it depends on your family size. And I'll share an example. I had a client last year. She has 5 children. So there's 6 in the family, divorced. Her income was just getting up to somewhere in the range of $80,000. But she has an income protection allowance of roughly about $58,000. So it brought her income down into the $20,000 AGI range as far as Pell Grant. And both of her 2 older kids were able to get a Pell Grant, the full Pell Grant. Now, if she was in that income range with only, excuse me, 1 child, then that would not have been the same outcome. Possibly a little bit of a Pell Grant, but not very much that would have made a difference. So it's, again, go to the studentaid.gov site and play around with the estimator so you can get an idea of what your income is, how many are in your household, to see where are you going to fall in that SAI range. So we're coming to that case study that we mentioned. So the way that they determine financial aid is with this formula. You take the cost of attendance of the school, you subtract the SAI, the student aid index, and that's going to equal the financial need, or what I call the funding gap. I've stopped talking about financial need so much because then people think, well, I'm going to get all this aid because I have a financial need. Just remember, a lot of the aid that is awarded from the colleges does come in the form of loans. It's not just grants and scholarships. Work study is only for people that have true financial need, very low income, but it's not guaranteed. a student has to apply, and there aren't that many work-study jobs on a lot of the campuses. But oftentimes they're going to be offered to make up that gap in the form of either the subsidized and unsubsidized loans for the student, but also a hefty chunk for the parents in the form of Parent Plus loans. So this case study that I've got here, this was just 3 nights ago, and I was helping someone with their CSS profile. And so this parent, single parent with 1 child, AGI 73,000. And so a household balance of assets that would be counted, this has got nothing to do with retirement and the school that they're considering does not assess equity in the home. But there's 560,000 of assets that are sitting in assessed accounts, not a qualified retirement deferred account. The student has 340,000 of that in the UGMA or UTMA, as the parent just asked, because a grandparent that wanted to give that money for the student. Let's put it in the student's name so that they don't have to pay as much in taxes, and the student doesn't have access to that money until they're at least 25 years old. So if you see down here at the bottom of the slide, there's 2 examples. One example, the $94,392 is the cost of attendance for her number 1 school. Mom's SAI number, if the 340,000 of those assets were in her combined 560, would give her a SAI number of 36,590, leaving a financial need or funding gap of almost $58,000. This particular school gives that gap in all financial need-based aid in grants. Mom still has to come up with this 36,590, which is her SAI number. But because the student has the assets, and a student's assets are assessed at 20%, a parent's assets are assessed at 5%. So now that changed the SAI number to be higher than what the cost of attendance is for that school. And there is no funding gap. There is no financial need. So if you come into a situation like this, be very careful about where those funds are going, if it's going to be for the student, because their assets are assessed much higher than a parent's assets. And so this has completely eliminated her ability to have any financial need-based aid. And looking at the list of schools that this student had, there was not one of them on her list of 18 schools that provided any merit scholarships. They were all financial need-based schools, and their SAI number is higher than the amount of any of the schools. Now, if she had a school that was the cost of attendance was 35,000, that just means that she's going to pay out of pocket 35,000, not the 100,000. But given that her number 1 school was almost $95,000, which just gives me the heebie-jeebies, their SAI number is higher. So there is no gap. And so if she attends there, she would have to pay whatever the full price was. And that's what you need to know early enough that you're not going to have that situation and not have that heartache, and coming into this scenario so late in the game as a senior. So on to better things. How do we address that funding gap? You know, your savings. Do you have a 529? Have you been saving since birth, or everything had to be put on hold because life just happened and you lost a job, or somebody got sick? There's no judgment. There's no, we all try to do the best that we can for our kids. But so you may have saved enough to help your student to pay for college, or you may not have. You want to know, going into this, as you're building the college list, what are going to be affordable schools, depending on what your plan is to help your student bridge that gap. Because remember, no longer can the student just get all the loans in their name and they'll figure it out and pay it like what you probably did. And your parents didn't have to, co-sign or take on any of that debt. The landscape has changed. So of course, we all want grants and scholarships. And depending on your college list, your student might be able to qualify. Now, a lot of the schools will allow you to have a payment plan, and some, they might charge you like $30 or $50 to set up a payment plan, but it might be a 10-month plan, or it might be, well, we'll give you three payments over the semester to make that up. So you have to find out, what is their process. And pay as you go is kind of similar to the payment plan. You're going to pay, from your current earned income. Tighten up your belt. Just start eating ramen noodles, just like your student will in college. Now, mom and dad have to do the same thing. Everybody's different. Everybody's going to address this differently. And many of you are going to have to take the loans. It's not the end of the world as long as you're addressing it and understanding, well, how much are we willing to take on in loans? What are those repayments going to be like once our student has graduated? Because I'm going to tell you, I see now, 20 years ago, it was the loans on the back of the student, their grad school loans, med school loans, and such. But now the bulk of the loans for undergrad are so high, and that's on the back of the parents. And many parents are going into retirement still owing this undergrad student loan debt, whether it's a federal Parent Plus loan or it's a co-signed private loan that maybe your student hasn't been able to make those payments. So again, there's a lot to think about as you're building your college list, and don't just look at the first year. Look at the overall cost of the 4 years. And if we are going to have to take on loans, what is that repayment going to be like? Is it going to be $500 a month for the standard 10 years? Or is it going to be $3,000 a month because we want our student to be able to go to their dream school, and it's going to end up costing us about, $250,000 to $300,000 or more for an undergrad degree? Is that in your budget? Most people are going to say, no, it's not. So for you, those of you early planners, and you're still trying to figure out, well, how can I lower my AGI? Is it going to make sense to, for one? But if you're in that, that gray area where, hey, I could probably lower my AGI and maybe have some more financial need-based opportunities, what can I do to lower that? And so you can max out your tax deferred opportunities with your employer, max out your 401ks, 403bs, health savings plans. But the thing is, if you're lower income, it's harder to do that. So, there's a balance. So don't shortchange yourself thinking that, well, if I put all my money into my retirement, if you're going to end up borrowing loan money, don't shortchange yourself, and don't shortchange yourself for your emergency fund as well. So, it's all within a balance for your own, for your household. What can the student be doing? I mean, keep up their great grades, test scores, the SAT or ACT. I know that you're saying, oh, but schools are test optional now. If you're trying to get more merit scholarships at schools, you want to try to increase those SAT and ACT scores at the schools that require it. Many of them, go to their websites and you'll see that they have tiers of, even for out-of-state students, you get a certain GPA and a certain SAT or ACT score, and you get $8,000 a year. It goes up to the next level. Now you're getting 15,000. Now you're getting 20 or 28,000. It's those scores and GPAs can play a major role in your student helping to bring down that cost of college. Now, the AP courses and the dual enrollment, they can give college credit. It just depends on the school. So, as you're building your list, take a look at, do they give credit for AP classes? Sometimes they do with if they score on their exams a 4 or a 5. Sometimes even if they score a 5, they don't give credit, college credit, but they're accepting the student because they had, show that they can handle a rigorous class load. So again, it just depends on the schools. Dual enrollment is really great if you're going to stay within the state. CLEP classes, go to the College Board and just Google or do the search bar for CLEP courses and AP, and you'll be able to see the schools that will give credit for those kind of courses. Every little bit helps. And it might not, if they don't give extra credit, that your student can graduate, in 3 years rather than 4, maybe your student can get 2 majors instead of 1, or a major and 2 minors. So again, you have to do your due diligence. And of course, the activities that pay off for those third-party scholarships it takes a system in place to be able to benefit from those, but leadership and volunteering and having a job after school and clubs and sports and such, all of these things can pay off for those third-party scholarships that are coming from outside of the colleges. Typically, your biggest scholarships are going to come from the schools in the form of merit scholarships, if that school gives merit. But oftentimes they can also set up a system 30 or 60 minutes a week of looking for outside scholarships because of the things that they've done, their extracurriculars and such. And I'm going to tell you, those of you with younger students, you can start earning those third-party scholarships as young as middle school. You don't have to wait until their senior year to start applying for scholarships, but just realize, if you are a low-income family and you're receiving financial need-based aid, and your student brings in $5,000 in an outside scholarship, they're going to replace that grant that they gave you of that 5,000. So those third-party scholarships are a real benefit for those families that don't qualify for any financial need. They're not going to take away the merit scholarships. So again, it's a balance. And, try to get your financial house in order. Start to pay off some some debt and improve your credit scores if you're going to be co-signing with the private lender loans. That can save you quite a bit in the long term, but just know that you can co-sign for your student and expect them to take over that loan at some point when they've graduated. And there's a lot of private lenders that say, yes, we'll let the cosigner go, but they have specific criteria for that. And the student has to be working in a job that is going to let the lender know that there's not going to be a risk. They don't no longer need that cosigner. So it's kind of hard to prove at some point, especially if the student has their own federal student loans that is on their credit report as well. Now, somebody had mentioned grandparents. And the good thing about grandparent 529s and grandparent contributions, the student is no longer penalized for those like they were in the past. But, again, you just got to make sure that that money isn't going into a trust that is going to be in the student's name. So your parents can go ahead and have a contribute to a 529 for your student, and they're no longer going to be penalized as they were in the past. So that's a good thing. But a lot of you are thinking, well, if a 529 account is considered a parent investment. So if you have a 529 for your child, that's going to be assessed at 5.64% as any asset on your balance sheet. And you're thinking, well, then maybe I should just transfer that over to my parent, and then it's not going to show up. You just got to be very careful with that, because then it's going to be a challenge for your grandparents, especially if somebody ends up having to need long-term care or something that now these assets are on their balance sheet. It could be harmful for them, or they could you get a have an argument with your parent, and all of a sudden that's their money, it's not yours anymore. So just be very careful in thinking about that. So the key to affordability is starting to plan early. Find out what your SAI is now. It's going to change a little bit. Hopefully your income is going to increase and such, so your SAI number is going to go up. But start seeing, what are we willing to be able to pay? What can we pay? Do your due diligence. Check out colleges that are going to be a great fit for your student, academically, socially, but also financially, for you to help them manage those costs. And save as much as you can, but not at the risk of your retirement or your emergency fund. And for those of you with younger children, don't put all your eggs in one basket for your older child, because then your younger children are going to miss out. And look at the big picture, not just, okay, we'll get them into the first semester and then we'll figure it out as we go. You've got to have that big picture. What's going to happen in 4 years? What are those repayments going to be like, especially if you're taking on any loans? So Debbie, I think we've come to the end. I haven't even looked at my watch. I didn't want to be distracted. Do we have time for any questions?
Yeah, let's just answer a few questions. There were several questions about, I guess, from parents of who are divorced. Can you explain a little bit about how child support is included in, like, and how it may or may not affect which parent fills out FAFSA?
Correct. So the child support used to count as income to the parent, but now it's assessed as an asset, which is a good thing. Assets are assessed much less, it's at 5.64%, whereas income could be assessed anywhere from 22 to 47%, beyond the income protection allowance. So I hope that answered that question. And I see somebody, our trust for parents part of SAI and FAFSA. Yes. Yes, it doesn't matter if you can't touch the money until such a time. The only time that you might get a little bit of a professional judgment on, if you have like a medical trust for another child in the family, or maybe you had a medical trust because of an accident or something, and then that is you can submit a professional judgment to the school to and then show them the documentation for that. But if it's a trust that, you know, a parent set up, a grandparent or such, then it will count as an asset.
Lauren, can you just go over, and I know you explained this, how contributing to a 401k or other type of retirement plan could be beneficial to reducing somebody's AGI, and then that could also help with their SAI.
Sure. So on the FAFSA, the way that it's done now is you log in. We're not going to get into all those details, but your tax return is now the only thing that the FAFSA is looking at. In the past, they would take your tax return and then you would input what contributions you made to your 401k, to your HSAs from your W-2, and it would get added back to your adjusted gross income. So your full income would be assessed. Now, that is no longer the case. They're not asking what is on your W-2. So they're just taking what is on your tax return. And so your contributions to your deferred accounts are not on your tax return. So that's how, if you can put more monies into your qualified accounts, max out if you can, that's a lot. But the more that you can put into those contributions that are tax deferred, the better off you're going to be. It will lower your SAI number. But again, it may not make a difference. So it depends what income level that you're at. And if you're just looking at, okay, I saw that there were a lot of Virginia people here tonight. So let's just say that your AGI is 150 and you're looking at Virginia Tech. Your SAI, it's not going to make a difference in the world if you put more monies into your 401k, if you think that it's going to get you more aid at your state school, because your SAI is still going to be much higher than what the cost of attendance will be. So you have to look at what schools that you're applying to.
And actually, I was going to explain that on a high level, that, I mean, we're just talking about one part of the process tonight. We're talking about how to understand your SAI and, you know, what, actually, we didn't even go into full detail about all of the formula for SAI, but really just gave you an overview about what things you could do as a parent of a 10th grade and 11th grader to maybe make some impact on your SAI, and kind of introduced what SAI is and what FAFSA. But there's kind of honestly like a whole nother several hours to this, you know, learning process that would then take what we just talked about to teach you how the colleges use the SAI and how that should impact how you want to create a college list, you know, with your student, and how you can start to estimate what your net cost is going to be, and how you find colleges that can offer your student merit scholarships. So there's like several more layers to this, but this is kind of like the first most important one, because particularly for families of 11th graders, kind of the deadline for your base year is going to be the end of 2024. So that's why we focused on this content for tonight. Okay, Luann, one other question somebody had about military retirement. Is the
Okay.
military disability included? Is the military retirement included?
So military retirement for 401k, you've retired and you're taking distribution from your 401k, that is income. So it's no longer savings, but it's income. Now, as far as military disability, if it's not taxable, then it's not going to be included. So like Social Security disability income is, well, it's low enough that you're going to qualify for aid, but for, let's just say that a parent is receiving Social Security disability income and their minor children are also receiving that benefit as because the parent is receiving Social Security. The Social Security that the children are receiving is not assessed at all in income, but your disability income, it just depends on how much of it is taxed. Your taxable income is assessed. So hopefully that makes sense.
And just to also be clear, somebody's asking, and I had this question a few times, is the 529 distribution considered income?
No. So as long as you're using the 529 to pay qualified education expenses, tuition, room and board, so up to the cost of attendance that the school designates. So oftentimes students will move off campus in their sophomore year, and if their rent is higher than the cost of attendance that the school lists for room and board, you can borrow from your 529, not borrow, but take a distribution from your 529 up to that cost of attendance for room and board. But anything beyond that, if you use the 529 for that, you're going to pay taxes on it. So it's just for qualified education expenses.
And the last comment or topic, maybe, and just a few seconds on this. And Luann, I didn't talk to you about this in advance, so you can decide whether you want to comment. But somebody actually early on in the question said, will all this make a difference with what may happen? Yeah, what may or may not happen, with the coming new administration. And there's definitely been talks about dismantling the Department of Education. Let me just give you my 2 cents, and it's just opinion because we don't really know anything yet, and I'm digging in myself to learn as much as I can every day. But let me tell you something that actually just happened in the past week is that, again, Luann, you and I didn't talk about this, but Congress actually passed a new, I don't know what you'd call it, a bill or regulation that requires FAFSA to be open on October 1st. So as Luann actually mentioned earlier, FAFSA only had to be actually legally from Congress had to be opened by January 1st. In the past 5-6 years or so, it has been pushed back and they've been opening it by October 1st. But it legally didn't have to be opened by October 1st. But now they just passed that it does. So quite honestly, the fact that Congress went to the effort to, pass this tells me, that they're not going to get away or kill FAFSA. That's just my opinion. I think what might happen, I have no idea what will happen with the Department of Education. What I've been reading is that because there's a good likelihood that maybe everything that Department of Education or a lot of what the Department of Education does as it relates to federal aid or financial aid and student loans might move to another agency, potentially the Department of Treasury. I am just, again, hypothesizing based on my readings. I do not think that loans will go away, although What may happen is that some loans might be moved to private lenders to take on some of this. Again, hypothesizing, but but what might go away, and Luann, you can chime in on anything that I'm saying, are the forgiveness programs, and not just the forgiveness programs that Biden has put into place and is trying to kind of still put into place, but there have been others that have been in place before Biden, and particularly the public service loan forgiveness plans. I have a feeling that they either will be cut back or they might be eliminated for new people. I don't know. Luann, if you have any thoughts about any of this.
Boy, what a loaded question. So first, the government doesn't work very fast. So,
Yes,
we've been waiting for like 6 years for them to do what they did to the FAFSA, and it was a disaster. So the Department of Education, it needs a cleanup, quite honestly, but it's not going to go away. And if they might move it to the Department of Treasury, but student loans are not going to go away. It's an act of Congress, like what
they might cap them. They might cap the student loans. That's another thing.
Well, they can't make the student loans any lower.
I'm sorry, I meant the parent
plus loans.
Yes.
Yes. They have been talking for years that a cap needs to be put on the Parent Plus loans. And I completely agree.
Yeah, I actually would agree with that too. And just so that you guys understand kind of what the implication would be, is that would probably put pricing pressure on colleges.
Yep.
Because right now, colleges know that the majority of people can get a loan from the federal government as a Parent Plus loan to fill any gap that they have. But if now they end up that there's a cap and families can only borrow up to a certain amount of a Parent Plus loan, well, now they know that every family that comes to them doesn't have a financial resource that they can go to fill the gap that they might have. So I think that would definitely put pricing pressure on a lot of colleges.
Yep, it's going to. And, I'm a college funding student loan advisor. I got certified a number of years ago, which means that I help families to, with the repayment of the loans, with the public service loan forgiveness and such. What is going to change, it's not that the loan forgiveness is going to go away. It's some of these programs are going to be changed. Not the public service loan forgiveness. I mean, it started in 2007. It's an incentive for people that go into public service, like teachers and the military and anybody.
And the government and people who work for the government.
Yes, anybody that works for the federal, state, or county government, police officers, fire department. It's a benefit to those people that are, serving the public. So it's a wonderful program, but they still have to make their payments. It's not a free-for-all. There is the loan forgiveness that goes to term. This is where some of the problems are. You can get a Parent Plus loan and have it paid out for like 20 to 25 years, but then you have that balance forgiven, but you're going to have a taxable consequence on that. So the government isn't going to get rid of all of these loan programs because they make a lot of money.
I was going to say that's always bothered me a little bit, but they make a lot of money on student loans and Parent Plus loans.
Absolutely. So what happened?
They may make more money than private lenders.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what this whole issue was, and I don't want to get into a political discussion, but it was political, this whole SAVE program. And SAVE, I mean, those of us that are in the industry, as soon as we saw it, we thought, what the heck? It would cost more than it was so underestimated as far as the cost to the country for the SAVE program. I think it would have been the best thing ever to help families not have that escalating interest, but the cost to the country was just enormous. And that's why it started all of this hoopla about, you know, the forgiveness and you know, dividing everybody. The SAVE program is gone. I mean, there's no way that it's going to go forward. But there are still the other income-driven repayment plans that are, their families are going to have to pay more of their payment. So it's another reason why you need to assess how much of this debt repayment are you going to be able to make? And I think that the government is eventually going to have to put caps on what a parent can. You can have no income coming in. You are a stay-at-home parent, and you can still take a loan, a federal Parent Plus loan of $30,000 or $40,000 per year.
Actually, that was a question, Luann, somebody asked, or a few people asked, do you have to have income for the loan? Not for
Nope.
federal loans. I'm not quite sure for private loans what they would
Private
do.
loans, you absolutely have to have
Yeah,
income,
yeah.
your debt ratio, your scores. But for the federal loans, it's gotten into a real mess because there was no limits. And then once you get into the repayment, and a lot of parents didn't even understand what they were signing up for. So, but I don't think that anything is going to happen. The loans aren't going to go away. It's not going to suddenly be that there's no more federal loans. But I think there will be limits. Is it going to happen this year or next year? No, because
Hard to know. Yeah,
they
it's
don't.
doubtful it will work. It will happen this coming year.
Yeah, it's that's not their number one point on the agenda.
So, okay, everyone, I hope that this was helpful. I'm happy that you guys were here tonight to get started. And hopefully you learned a lot. I mean, my goal is, and our goal is that you learn as much that we do not want to see you in October and November of your students' senior year of high school talking to us about this.
Yeah. Or worse yet, in April,
Right.
once those financial aid awards are coming in and you see that, oh my gosh, there's no scholarships here and all they're offering us is loans.
Right. I mean,
you know,
whatever
that's
the financial aid award that your students should get, I mean, you won't know, we can't guarantee what it's going to be, but you shouldn't be surprised when it comes in. It should be kind of within a range of what you expected. So I mean, that's our goal, is to kind of help you estimate these costs so that you are not shocked when it comes through at the end. And you've planned and you've basically applied to the right places. So there's a lot of pieces that still need to come into place, but tonight was a great starting point for a lot of you. Okay, thanks everyone. This recording will go out tomorrow, so you'll get a link to it. Thank you, Luann, and
best of luck, everyone.
Yep, see everyone soon. Bye.
All right, have a good night, Debbie.
Good night.